Hey everybody, it's Rogway here, and today we are going to be looking at a technique called tweening in Animate, which is a way of making animations quicker and easier. If you're not familiar with that term tweening, it's short for between, not like a 12-year-old tween, betweening. Okay, so the name comes from being able to fill frames automatically between keyframes. So I'm going to show you how that works. I have a file here called Tweening Start, and if we go into it, you're going to see that we are exactly where we left off in the last tutorial with the person that's walking on the spot. This just happens to be a more detailed version. So if I go and I hit my play button in the corner, or if I go to Control Test, either way it's the same thing. We can watch this, and we're going to just have this guy who is walking on the spot forever. All right. So in the last tutorial, I showed you how to make those keyframes so that you have basically every keyframe is a new slide. It's a new frame so that you can build your drawings frame by frame. You can use onion skinning. That was a technique we looked at where you could see how the frames overlap one another. And now we're going to look at tweening. So this first layer, I'm going to just call it walk for now. I just double click the name. And I'm going to lock it because I'm going to show you a few other things first. Then I'm going to hit the plus. And I'm going to call this one tween. Okay. And so you'll notice that Animate will automatically add a bunch. First of all, add a blank keyframe, but it'll add a bunch of frames that have nothing on them right now. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a shape that we are going to use for our tween. And so in the shape sort of tools here, I'm going to pick an oval. Okay. And I'm going to set the fill color. I don't know why it needs that. I'm going to set the fill color to just a bright color. It doesn't really matter. The stroke color is the outline. If you ever want to turn that off, you can click it, and there's a little, it's really easy to miss, but there's a little sort of block with a line going through it. You can click that, and then you don't have to worry. You won't have a stroke or a line on your shape. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just draw a circle. Now if you want to make a perfect circle, you have to hold shift to make a perfect circle. Okay, there we go. All right, so now we have a circle, and I forgot to mention you should have been on the first frame of the tween layer. If you didn't, then just undo, a couple times, Command Z or Control Z if you're on a PC, and just make sure you're on the first frame of the tween layer. And if you ever want to select whatever's on that layer, you can just click the keyframe. That'll select everything on that layer. Or if you want to be more selective about what you choose with the selection tool, you can drag sort of selections over part of it. Okay. Basically, what we want to do is we want to get the circle selected. And you'll know it's selected in Animate because you'll see it's full of these little dots. Those little dots tell us that that object is now selected. Now, in order to do a tween, let's say we want this ball or this circle to travel from the left side of the screen to the right side of the screen. If we applied what we already know, what we could do is just keep making keyframes and just slowly move it until it gets to this side. However, in Animate, there's a much easier way to do that. With the object selected, we are going to turn it into a symbol. Okay, so under Modify, we're going to convert it to a symbol. And it's going to ask us to give it a name. I'm just going to call it ball. And it's going to ask us what type of symbol this is. And so it's very important that we pick the right type. And I'm going to choose graphic. Okay. There are different types of symbols, and they all have different sort of purposes or different uses. But for this, we're going to use the graphic symbol. We're going to hit OK. All right. Now, in doing that, you're going to see that the circle now has a blue rectangle around it. That's telling us that it is a symbol now. You notice that we can't change anything on it. We can't select. If we go to the select, we're not going to be able to get any dots showing up, because basically what a symbol is, it's like a group that has now become one object. Okay, so this is like one object. If you ever want to edit your symbol, if you ever want to go and edit it, you can double click it. And you'll notice now up here that we are now inside of the symbol. Okay, you can see that we started at scene 1, but now we are actually inside of the ball symbol. And we can change whatever we want. We can add more to it or whatever. But if you ever find that you're stuck in this, I call it the symbol editor, where you're actually inside of the symbol, you always need to remember to go back out either with the back arrow or clicking where you want to go out to get back out to your main scene. You'll notice that when you're inside of the symbol, you don't see any of the layers that we had previously. So you want to make sure you go back out to the main scene. Okay, so now tweening. One thing important to mention is you can only have one symbol animating per layer at a time. Okay, so you can only have one tween per layer. All right, so again, the first frame, there's a keyframe there, and this is telling us that this ball is starting at the left side of the stage. Then what we're going to do is, rather than fill in keyframes all the way along, we're just going to go straight to the last one. And we're going to right click and insert a keyframe again. So now we have a keyframe at the start, we got a keyframe at the end. And on the end keyframe, we're going to take the ball and we're going to move it. Okay, so make sure, let me just repeat that. Make sure you have the last keyframe selected. Make sure you're not back here. You want to make sure you're at the last keyframe, and you're going to move it somewhere on the screen, somewhere like here. Okay? Now, if you did this correctly and you move the little playhead, you'll see that it starts there and stays at that position until the very last frame, and it jumps to there. Now we're going to use Animate to tween, or to fill in the in-between. Okay, and the way we're going to do this, we're going to right-click in anywhere in this gray area, and we're going to create a classic tween. And now you're going to see that the ball will automatically travel from its starting point to its ending point. And like I said, we didn't have to do any drawing in between. It figured out to get the ball there. Okay? Now the cool thing about tweening is, because you've got these two keyframes, you can go to any of these keyframes and you can move the ball at any point, and now it will update to that position instead. All right, so you can always move it around, and as long as you don't try to do it in between, because that's going to add a keyframe there, you either go to the start or the end, then you can adjust its position to wherever you want. So that is called a classic tween. Okay, now we're going to look at something a little more advanced. We have the walk cycle, okay? And the walk cycle currently has each frame drawn on a separate keyframe. Okay, there's 8 of them. We want to actually store the entire walk cycle inside of a symbol. And I'm going to show you the benefit of that. So to do this properly, what we got to do is we got to unlock our walk cycle. We're going to lock the tween layer. We don't accidentally move that. We're going to go to the first frame. And you'll notice that this one already has a blue block around it. Okay, and if I go up here to object, you can see that this object, it's called pose 1. And it was a PNG originally. But what we want to do is we want to convert that to a symbol. Okay, so we're going to go up to modify, we're going to convert it to a symbol, and we're going to call it walking dude. I don't know. Make sure it's a graphic and hit OK. All right, you'll see that nothing here has changed except up here at object now, it tells us now that it's a graphic symbol. And we're not going to talk about instance names, but basically we know now that it is a symbol. Now here's a tricky part. What we want to do is we want to take all of these frames from frame 2 all the way to 8, and we want to store them inside of this symbol. And you're going to see the benefit of this at the end. But remember what I said, if you double click a symbol, you can go inside of it, and you'll see here this is walking dude. You'll notice inside of a symbol you have a timeline. It's completely blank. It doesn't have anything on there because there's only the first keyframe, which is just the first picture. However, inside of symbols you can have entirely separate animations happening inside of them. Think of a symbol as a container that can hold many things. All right, so let me show you how we're going to do this. We're going to go to the second frame. We're going to hold Shift on our keyboard, and we're going to click the last frame so that all of these frames get selected. So everywhere from 2 to 8 is blue now. Then we're going to right click, and we are going to cut those frames out. So we're going to cut them from the scene. And now they're gone. You'll see that there's no more keyframes in here. Then what we're going to do is we're going to go to our first frame. Remember, this is the symbol now. We're going to double click it. And we're going to go in our timeline here now and click the second frame, hold Shift, click to the 8th frame, and then we're going to right click and we're going to paste the frames now. Now you'll notice something really strange. When we scroll over our guy, we don't see those other frames where he's walking. We just see the first one. And I'll tell you, I'm not really sure why Animate does this, but what we have to do is we have to go up in our corner here. We have to zoom out a little bit. That's probably too far. And you're going to see that the frames get put way out on the outside of the scene. And I'm not sure why that happens. But the easy way to fix it is just to bring your playhead to the first frame, turn on the onion skin, and move your first frame so that it matches back up with all the other frames from the walk cycle so that he's lined up again. And then we're going to turn off onion skin, and you should see that he's walking on the spot sort of off the scene here, off the frame. Okay, so now you might be wondering, why did we bother doing all that? What we're going to do is we're going to go back out to our scene. So we're going to click the back arrow here. You'll see now that we have this single symbol, okay, of this guy and no other frames, okay? One thing I have to mention, because it's very important, is we have a blank keyframe here, which we actually don't want to have because we don't want to wipe our guy off the stage. We want our guy to be on the stage the whole time. So we're going to click this blank keyframe here. We're going to right click it. We're going to clear the keyframe. We're going to get rid of it so that our guy can extend all the way to frame 8. Now, if you look at what's happening here, even though we only have one symbol, you will see that our guy will walk just like he did before, because all of those other frames are stored inside of the symbol. So again, if I was to double click that, we would see that those frames are there. Now, because I did all of those steps, now what I can do is I can tween my guy to walk across the stage. So if I am on the first frame here, remember we did the same thing with the ball. I have his starting position. And if I go to the 8th frame and I right click and I insert a blank keyframe, now I can move him to where I want him to end up. Sorry, not a blank keyframe, a regular keyframe. My bad. Don't want to confuse you. Let me do that again. Last frame, right click, regular keyframe, not a blank keyframe, because that'll make a blank blank frame. There won't be anything there. So we're going to insert a keyframe. We're going to move him over to somewhere over here. And then all we have to do is, just like with the ball in the gray area, we're going to right click and we're going to create a classic tween. And now you're going to see that our guy will actually walk across the stage rather than just be a single image. And so if I go to play that, you'll see it's very fast. I'll slow it down. Okay. By the way, if you ever want to change your frame rate, you go to modify, you go to document. Your frame rate is right here. And I'm going to just lower it to 8 or something, which is not a good idea normally, but it's just to see how it plays a little better. We can see that he's walking across nicely and he goes through all of his 8 poses. Now, again, the reason this is super important, guys, is tweening is going to save you tons of time. If you have to draw things over and over and over again, it's going to drive you crazy. Some people like to do frame by frame animation, but generally you want to save time. And one neat thing that I haven't shown you yet is with symbols, once you have it built, you'll notice up here you have this thing called the library. And in the library, you're going to see that we can just pull out copies of our symbols once we have them. And all of these symbols should just walk on the spot. Oh, I only put them on the last frame. Whoops, my bad. Let me just remove the tween. Okay, so we're just going to right click and remove that. And I'm actually going to remove the later keyframe as well, just so you can see that these guys will all walk on the spot. And you can make huge crowds of people that way just by making one symbol. So it's a huge time saver. You'll see everything that you kind of use in your project will be stored in the library. You can easily just drag a copy out. But keep in mind that you can only animate one symbol per layer. Okay, if you want to tween something, you can only do it in one layer, like one object per layer. So if I want this guy to move, I got the starting frame, I go to the last frame, I insert my keyframe, move him to where I want him to go, and then I just right click in the gray space and I make that tween and he will walk there. All right, well, I hope this was useful. Again, very important. I would love to see you guys include this in your projects and see what you can do with it. Tweening is going to save you tons of time. Stay tuned for the next episode, next tutorial, because again, we build on this and you'll understand how it can be used to make a really effective and professional looking animation. So stay tuned.